The sky over Earth was clear when they arrived. A ripple in space, silent yet ominous, split open the void above the planet, and from it emerged colossal ships, unlike anything humanity had ever seen. They were not mere vessels. They were floating monuments of power, massive enough to eclipse the stars. Their hulls shimmered with an unnatural glow, an eerie energy that pulsed like the heartbeat of something ancient and terrible. The world watched in stunned silence as the fleet descended, their presence alone enough to choke the air with fear. Then came the message, not through radio waves, not through any technology known to man, but as a voice that echoed inside the minds of every human being. Kneel before your gods. The Veiltar had returned. That was what they called themselves, beings of light, architects of the cosmos, rulers of all sentient life. They did not ask for surrender. They demanded worship. Across the world, televisions, phones, and digital screens flickered to life, displaying the image of their supposed divinity. Towering figures, neither fully solid nor ethereal, with luminous eyes that held the weight of eternity. They claimed that long before humanity had taken its first steps, they had ruled over the stars, shaping entire civilizations with their wisdom and power. Now, they had returned to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. They spoke of mercy, of a future where humanity could thrive under their divine rule, but the unspoken promise of destruction lingered beneath their words. Earth was given a choice: submit or be erased from existence. For a brief moment, the world seemed to hesitate. These beings were unlike any alien force encountered before. They did not negotiate, nor did they seek war in the traditional sense. They had no need for diplomacy, no desire for treaties. They were the law, the supreme authority that had ruled for eons. Other civilizations across the galaxy had already bowed before them, their submission a silent warning of what would happen to those who resisted. Humanity had faced threats before: war, famine, invasion, but never had they been told to worship their conquerors. It was not a demand Earth could accept. The first act of defiance came from a single missile, launched from an orbital defense platform above Mars. A desperate, instinctive response from a lieutenant who refused to kneel before an unseen god. The missile streaked toward the nearest Veiltar warship, its nuclear payload primed to detonate on impact. But before it could reach its target, the air itself seemed to tremble. The warship did not fire back, did not deploy shields or countermeasures. Instead, the missile vanished, erased from existence as if it had never been. A voice, deeper and colder than before, echoed once more across the system. Do not resist. This is your only warning. Then came the first demonstration of power. Above the red sands of Mars, a single Veiltar vessel moved into position. It did not fire weapons. It simply hovered, its structure humming with unseen energy. And then, before the eyes of millions watching from orbit, Mars began to die. Cities on the surface crumbled as if turned to dust, the entire atmosphere trembling under an invisible force. The Martian colonies, once proud bastions of human progress, were erased. Not destroyed, not bombarded, but erased from existence in a way that defied all logic. The red planet itself remained, barren and silent, but every trace of human life was gone. One moment they had existed: scientists, workers, families, and the next, they were nothing. Panic spread across Earth like wildfire. Governments scrambled to respond. Military leaders issued emergency orders, but there was no countermeasure, no defense against such overwhelming power. Satellites detected no energy signatures, no projectile weapons, only the quiet, terrifying reality that the Veiltar could unmake whatever they wished. People looked to the stars in horror, understanding for the first time what true insignificance felt like. If the so-called gods willed it, humanity would simply cease to be. Yet, even in the face of annihilation, humanity did not kneel. Fear gripped the hearts of many, but so did anger. If the Veiltar had the power to erase them so easily, why had they not done so already? Why issue a warning? Why allow even a moment of resistance? Questions turned into theories, and theories turned into resolve. The leaders of the United Terran Defense knew that surrender meant extinction, not just of humanity, but of their spirit. And so, a decision was made. Earth would not bow. In secret, scientists, engineers, and strategists worked to find answers. Military forces mobilized, though they knew their current weapons were useless. Humanity had little time, but they would use every second of it to fight. If the Veilter were truly gods, then Earth would be the first to defy the heavens. The so-called divine beings expected obedience. What they did not expect was resistance. As the days passed, the Veilter grew impatient. Their fleets positioned themselves around Earth, their ships forming an unbreakable wall in space. Soon, their judgment would fall. But humanity was not waiting for their doom. They were preparing for war. The world was not silent after Mars fell. Fear spread like a shadow over every city, every colony, every ship that still floated in the vastness of space. The Veilter had spoken with actions, not words, showing that they were not just rulers, but executioners. Their demand was clear: submit or be erased. Yet, even as the terrifying memory of Mars lingered, humanity did not kneel. Governments across Earth, the Moon, and the remaining colonies came together in urgency, not to discuss surrender, but to plan for war. The first step was understanding the enemy, and that meant unraveling the mystery of the Veilter's godlike power. How had they erased Mars without weapons? How had they intercepted a missile in the blink of an eye? The best minds in science, strategy, and warfare locked themselves in hidden research stations, knowing that time was not on their side. If the Veilter had already wiped out millions in a single breath, why hadn't they destroyed Earth yet? That question haunted every commander, every scientist, every soldier. And the answer became clear: the Veilter wanted humanity to kneel willingly. That realization changed everything. If these so-called gods truly held unlimited power, there would be no warnings, no messages, no displays of destruction. Earth would have simply ceased to exist like Mars. Instead, they were given a chance to bow, a chance to acknowledge the Veilter's rule. That meant the enemy had limits, even if humanity did not yet understand them. Perhaps their power required time to use. Perhaps they were bound by some ancient law. Or perhaps, despite all their strength, they feared something. Whatever the truth was, it meant one thing: humanity had a chance. A slim one, but a chance nonetheless. And that was all they needed. While the Veilter's warships hovered like gods above Earth, humanity worked in the shadows, turning fear into defiance. Military forces were mobilized in complete secrecy, their technology primitive compared to the enemy, but still deadly in its own way. Underground bunkers became command centers. Hidden research labs analyzed every scrap of alien data, and resistance cells were formed among the civilian population. Engineers studied the few remains of destroyed Veilter drones, searching for anything they could use against their oppressors. Scientists worked to understand the quantum resonance fields, the strange, invisible force that surrounded the Veilter ships and made them invulnerable to traditional weapons. It was a race against time, and the clock was already counting down. Then, the second attack came. It was not an invasion, not a battle, but something far worse. One by one, Earth's satellites began to vanish. Communication lines between colonies and outposts were severed without warning. The internet flickered, vital data wiped from existence as if it had never been there. The Veilter were erasing more than just people. Now they were erasing knowledge, history, records of human civilization. It was not just war, it was the beginning of complete annihilation. Earth had only hours before it was plunged into total isolation, cut off from its colonies, its defenses crippled, its people left blind to the movements of their enemy. The message was clear: kneel now, or lose everything. But humanity had already chosen its answer. They would not kneel. As the last satellites fell, Earth launched its first counterstrike. A fleet of hidden stealth ships, modified with experimental shielding, emerged from the dark side of the Moon. They were nothing compared to the Veilter warships, small, lightly armed, barely more than reconnaissance vessels. But they carried something new. A weapon developed in desperation, based on the only discovery humanity had made about the enemy's power. The resonance disruptor, a crude, untested device designed to shatter the quantum fields that made the Veilter invincible. It was not perfect, not refined, but it was the first weapon in history meant to kill a god. The mission was simple: strike first and strike hard. The stealth ships raced toward them. Nearest Veiltar vessel, a massive dreadnought hovering over Earth's orbit. They moved like ghosts, undetected until the moment they fired. The disruptors activated, unleashing an invisible pulse of energy that rippled through space. For the first time, the towering warship flickered, its shields trembling, its impossible energy barrier destabilizing. And in that moment of weakness, humanity struck. A barrage of missiles followed, each one armed with nuclear warheads modified with disruptor energy. The first explosion was blinding, a fireball that tore through the Veiltar hull like paper. The second hit deeper, breaching the core of the ship. And the third sent a shockwave through the entire Veiltar fleet. A god had fallen. The silence that followed was deafening. The galaxy had never seen such a thing before. The Veiltar, the rulers of the stars, had lost a warship. For the first time in untold millennia, something had hurt them. Across Earth, in underground bunkers and hidden bases, the news spread like wildfire. Humanity had drawn first blood. The Veiltar were not untouchable. They could be fought. They could be killed. The response was immediate. The Veiltar, once silent and patient, now moved with fury. More warships descended, preparing for a retaliation that would shake the planet. The illusion of their divinity had been shattered, and now they sought to remind humanity of their place. But it was too late. The moment they had given a warning, the moment they had hesitated instead of striking first, they had already lost. Humanity had seen through their illusion. This was no longer a battle of conquerors and the conquered. This was war. A war that the so-called gods had never thought they would have to fight. But humanity had always been different. They did not bow to kings, to emperors, to tyrants. And they would not bow to gods. The moment humanity defied the Veiltar, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. No species had ever dared to strike first against the so-called gods. Civilizations before them had crumbled, their worlds erased with a mere thought, their histories rewritten as nothing more than warnings to those who remained. But humans were different. They had seen through the illusion of divine power. They had learned that the Veiltar, despite all their terrifying abilities, had limits. And in war, knowing the enemy's limits was the first step to victory. The attack had been planned in total secrecy. Earth's remaining military forces had worked day and night in hidden bases, deep underground, their minds racing against time. The Resonance Disruptor, the first and only human weapon capable of breaking through Veiltar defenses, had been tested only once, but that test had brought down a god. It had shown that these invincible beings could bleed. And if they could bleed, they could be killed. Humanity's leaders knew they had only one chance. If they hesitated, the Veiltar would crush them without mercy. But if they struck first, if they struck hard, they could turn fear into something far more powerful. Hope. The plan was brutal in its simplicity. Earth's remaining warships, outdated and weak compared to the enemy, would not engage in direct combat. That was suicide. Instead, the fleet would serve as a distraction, drawing Veiltar forces into predictable positions while the real attack unfolded in the shadows. The Disruptor Strike Team, a small but elite force, would slip past the chaos and target the Veiltar command vessel, the heart of their fleet. If the Resonance Disruptor could disable its shields, even for a moment, Earth's hidden weapons could be unleashed. The target was not just any warship. It was the Prime Ascendant, the flagship of the Veiltar Armada. If it fell, the message would be clear: humanity was not prey. Humanity was not weak. Humanity would not kneel. The operation began in the dead of night, when the Veiltar were at their most complacent. The first wave of human warships launched from hidden bases across Earth's surface, breaking through the atmosphere and heading straight for the enemy fleet. They were old, outdated vessels, destroyers, cruisers, even refitted cargo ships carrying missile payloads. They had no real chance of victory, and every pilot knew it. But they didn't need to win. They just needed to hold the enemy's attention long enough for the real strike to begin. The Veiltar responded instantly. Their warships, massive and imposing, moved with unnatural precision, their golden hulls glowing with power. Beams of energy lashed out, cutting through human ships like paper. One after another, the brave pilots were obliterated, their sacrifices turning into streaks of fire across the blackness of space. But they did not retreat. They did not hesitate. Every second they bought was another second for the strike team to get into position. Beneath the chaos, 3 stealth vessels, small, black, and nearly invisible to scanners, slipped past the raging battle. Each one carried the most dangerous technology humanity had ever created: resonance disruptor bombs, designed to collapse the Veiltor's energy fields and leave them vulnerable. The ships moved like shadows, approaching the Prime Ascendant without a sound. The massive flagship loomed over them, its surface humming with the power that had erased entire worlds. The crew inside the stealth ships knew that if they were detected, they would be erased too. There would be no second chances. The countdown began. The disruptors were armed. The pilots locked onto their target, knowing that the moment they fired, their ships would no longer be invisible. The order came. Launch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the ship trembled. A soundless shockwave rippled through space, and for the first time, the Prime Ascendant's golden shields flickered. The impossible energy barrier that had made the Veiltor untouchable collapsed. The ship was vulnerable. Earth's final weapon was waiting for this moment. Hidden deep within the moon's surface was Project Ragnarok, a last resort planetary defense system, built in secret long before the Veiltor had arrived. A massive railgun, powered by the full force of Earth's energy reserves, had been loaded with a projectile unlike any other. It was not a simple missile. It was a planet cracker, designed to shatter even the strongest warships in existence. The moment the Prime Ascendant's shields went down, Earth fired its first and most devastating strike. The projectile moved at unimaginable speed, a streak of burning metal tearing through the battlefield. The Veiltor, for all their power, had no time to react. It hit the flagship dead center, piercing through its hull and detonating in a burst of energy that turned the void into fire. A god was dying. The explosion that followed was unlike anything the universe had seen before. The Prime Ascendant, the heart of the Veiltor fleet, the ship that had once erased planets with a mere thought, was now a shattered ruin. It broke apart in fire and debris, its remains scattering across space. For the first time in history, the impossible had happened. A god had fallen by human hands. The battlefield was silent. The Veiltor warships did not move. They did not retaliate. For a brief, frozen moment, they simply existed in stunned silence. Their kind had ruled the stars for millennia, believing themselves above all others. And yet, they had just witnessed something they had never considered possible. The mortals had fought back and won. Then, the reaction came. The remaining Veiltor warships shifted, their movements no longer slow and divine but erratic, uncertain, filled with something they had never felt before: fear. Their invincibility had been shattered. Their greatest weapon was gone. And now, they realized the truth. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was the storm that would bring their empire to its knees. The destruction of the Prime Ascendant was more than just a victory. It was a message, one that spread across the stars like wildfire. The Veiltor, the so-called gods, had ruled for millennia, reducing entire civilizations to dust with a mere thought. They had erased Mars without hesitation. They had shattered the wills of countless species before humanity. But now, for the first time in history, they were the ones who had suffered loss. Humanity had not just survived, they had struck down a god. And the universe took notice. In the hours after the battle, Earth stood silent, watching the wreckage of the fallen Veiltor flagship drift across space. The enemy fleet remained motionless, their golden warships gleaming under the cold light of distant stars. They did not retaliate. They did not speak. They simply hung in orbit as if they, too, could not believe what had just happened. The Prime Ascendant had been their symbol of absolute power, an icon of divine supremacy. And now, it was nothing more than burning debris. The illusion of their invincibility had been shattered. The first god had fallen. and humanity was still standing. But there was no time for celebration. The war was far from over. The Veiltar would not accept this defeat. They had ruled without challenge for too long. Their silence would not last. Their response would be swift and merciless. And when it came, Earth had to be ready. In underground bunkers, hidden military bases, and orbital stations, humanity prepared for the inevitable. The resonance disruptors had proven their worth, but the war had only just begun. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly, refining the technology, making it deadlier, more efficient. Every available ship was modified. The Veiltar struck without warning. Beams of energy rained from the sky, carving massive craters into Earth's surface. Cities burned. Oceans boiled. The ground trembled under the sheer force of their wrath. They were not here to conquer anymore. They were here to exterminate. But humanity had seen this coming. The moment the first explosion hit, Earth's defenses activated. Planetary shields hastily built from scavenged alien technology flared to life, absorbing the brunt of the attack. Hidden railgun platforms on the Moon and Mars fired back, unleashing tungsten projectiles at speeds that turned them into artificial meteors. Stealth bombers launched from underground silos, slipping past enemy detection, carrying payloads designed to tear through divine armor. The Veiltar had expected a broken world, a species begging for mercy. Instead, they found warriors. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Humans, once considered weak and insignificant, now fought on equal ground with the gods. The disruptors ripped through enemy shields, leaving them vulnerable to human firepower. For every city that fell, a Veiltar warship was destroyed. For every human life lost, a god bled. The war had become something new, something terrifying not just for humanity, but for the Veiltar as well. Then, something happened that had never happened before. The Veiltar began to retreat. One by one, their warships disengaged, pulling away from the battlefield. Their once imposing fleet, which had loomed over Earth like an executioner's blade, was now in full withdrawal. It was unthinkable. These beings had never known defeat. Never once in their existence had they been forced to flee. But today, they had been outmatched. Humanity had evolved in mere days, turning desperation into innovation, fear into strength. The gods had come to annihilate them. Instead, they had been the ones running for their lives. But humanity was not finished. The war had started with the Veiltar striking first. Now, it was humanity's turn. The hunted had become the hunters. Across the solar system, warships were rebuilt and refitted. New weapons were developed. And deep within Earth's command centers, a new strategy was formed: the final strike. The Veiltar had come to Earth believing themselves untouchable. Now, humanity would take the fight to them. It began with the first expedition fleet. Hundreds of ships, once outdated and powerless, now rebuilt with technology stolen from their fallen enemies. They launched from hidden bases across the system, heading straight for the Veiltar's nearest stronghold. The enemy never expected them to invade. The very idea was absurd. No species had ever dared set foot on their sacred worlds. No civilization had even considered an attack. But humanity was not like the others. When the first human boots touched down on Veiltar soil, the war changed forever. The gods were no longer rulers of the stars. They were no longer beings beyond mortal reach. They were no longer untouchable. They were prey. Human soldiers marched through their cities, disrupting their power, tearing apart their defenses. The Veiltar, once feared as all-powerful beings, now cowered before the very species they had tried to erase. The war that had begun as an extermination had turned into something else entirely. Humanity was not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to end the rule of gods. One by one, the Veiltar strongholds fell. Their warships, once seen as divine instruments of destruction, now burned in the void. Their people, once so certain of their supremacy, now whispered in fear. The word spread across the galaxy. The Veiltar are not gods. They are not invincible. And the humans are the ones who killed them. It was a moment that would be remembered forever. The day the first god fell, humanity had become something more, something greater. The God Killers. The end began with silence. For the first time in countless millennia, the Veilter had no commands to give, no threats to make, no punishments to unleash. Their warships, once symbols of divine wrath, now floated lifeless in the void, wrecked and broken. Their cities, once untouchable, now lay in ruins. The gods had fallen, and humanity had done the impossible. It had started with Earth's defiance, the moment when humanity refused to kneel. The first strike against the Prime Ascendant had shattered the illusion of Veiltar supremacy. The second had pushed them back. And now, the final blow was coming. Across the stars, human fleets moved like a relentless storm, tearing through the last remnants of the enemy's once mighty empire. The Veiltar, who had ruled the galaxy through fear, now knew that they were the ones being hunted. Their warlords, once arrogant and untouchable. On the bridge of Earth's lead warship, the UNS Valor, Admiral Elias Carter watched the final battle unfold. The last stronghold of the Veiltar, a planet-sized fortress known as Zorvakal, was all that remained of their once great dominion. The skies above it burned as human warships broke through the last of their defenses, cutting down the golden fleet that had once wiped out entire civilizations. The planet's shields flickered, weakened by relentless bombardment, and Carter knew it was only a matter of time before they collapsed entirely. This was not just another battle. This was the end. The Veiltar did not beg for mercy. Even in their final moments, they clung to their arrogance, believing that some last-minute miracle would save them. But there were no miracles left. The humans had stripped them of their power, broken their war machine, and turned their empire into nothing but dust. When the shields of Zorvakal finally shattered, Carter gave the final order. Launch the strike. From the depths of space, a final wave of projectiles descended upon the world of the gods. These were not ordinary bombs. They were resonance warheads, engineered specifically to disrupt the energy fields that had made the Veiltar invincible for so long. They struck the surface like falling stars, and in an instant, the divine citadels crumbled. The towering temples, the shrines built to honor their false godhood, the massive war foundries that had built the weapons of planetary destruction, all of them turned to fire and ruin. The gods were no longer gods. They were dust. But humanity did not stop there. From the ruins of Zorvakal, human soldiers emerged, stepping onto the sacred ground of their fallen enemy. The Veiltar who remained were dragged from their hiding places, their once glorious robes stained with ash and blood. These were the same beings who had once stood above all others, who had commanded fear and obedience with a single word. Now, they stood in chains, trembling before the very species they had sought to annihilate. Across the stars, the news spread. The Veiltar are dead. The war is over. The gods have fallen. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy was free. The empires that had once lived in terror now rejoiced, celebrating the fall of their oppressors. And at the center of it all was humanity. The species that had once been seen as weak, as insignificant, had done the unthinkable. They had destroyed a force that had seemed eternal. They had become the legends now. Admiral Carter stood among his soldiers, watching as the last of the Veiltar leaders were escorted away. Some would face trials for their crimes. Others had already chosen death over surrender. But it no longer mattered. Their era was over. And as the twin suns of Zorvakal set over the ruined landscape, he knew that a new chapter of history had begun. This was the day the gods fell. This was the day humanity became something greater.